A 23-year-old kid was given 13 days and a shoestring budget to film a movie about a man being hunted by a truck. That film launched the career of the most successful director in Hollywood history and changed cinema forever. The twist? The truck driver never speaks a single word, and the entire crew thought the project would be a career-ending disaster. It started as a made-for-TV movie that ABC executives nearly canceled 3 times during production. Steven Spielberg was an unknown television director who'd never made a feature film. The network gave him less than 2 weeks to shoot the entire thing, betting he'd fail. Instead, he created a masterpiece that would define his approach to building suspense for the next 50 years, influenced directors like Denis Villeneuve decades later, and proved that sometimes the most terrifying villain is one you never fully see. Today we're revealing 20 insane facts about the most brutal semi-truck crashes from the golden age of cinema that proved the 60s and 70s were absolutely unhinged when it came to vehicular destruction. We're talking about directors who were coked out of their minds, trucks that cost more than most people's houses to destroy, and stunts so dangerous that modern insurance companies would laugh you out of the room for even suggesting them. And by fact number 1, you'll understand why one 13-day shoot created a filmmaking philosophy that would terrify audiences in Jaws, Jurassic Park, and every Spielberg thriller that followed. Hit that like button if you love classic action cinema, and buckle up because we're starting with the invisible villain that made Steven Spielberg a household name. Duel wasn't supposed to be anything special. ABC ordered it as a 90-minute movie of the week, the kind of forgettable content that filled dead air on weekend afternoons. Richard Matheson wrote the screenplay based on his own short story, inspired by a real encounter where an aggressive truck driver tailgated him on a California highway. The concept was simple. Businessman Dennis Weaver drives through the desert while a massive tanker truck pursues him for no apparent reason. No explanation, no backstory, just pure vehicular terror. Spielberg read the script and saw something nobody else did. He recognized that the faceless truck driver could become a metaphor for unstoppable evil, the same way he'd later use a shark to represent nature's indifference to human life. The truck itself would be the monster. The production was chaos from day one. Spielberg had 13 days to film the entire movie, which meant every single shot had to count. There were no second chances, no reshoots, no safety net. The director worked with a tiny crew, minimal equipment, and a budget so tight that they couldn't afford to destroy more than one truck. That single 1955 Peterbilt 281 had to survive every scene until the final cliff crash, which meant the stunts had to be choreographed with surgical precision. One mistake would end production immediately. Spielberg later admitted he was terrified the entire time, convinced he was about to blow his only shot at directing a feature film. The pressure turned him into a perfectionist who demanded excellence from every department despite having almost no resources to work with. The brilliance of Duel lies in what Spielberg chose not to show. The truck driver remains completely invisible throughout the film, except for brief glimpses of his arm or boot. You never see his face, never hear his voice, never learn his motivation. This wasn't a budget constraint or creative compromise. Spielberg deliberately kept the driver hidden because he understood that human imagination creates more effective horror than anything you can put on screen. The faceless menace became more terrifying precisely because viewers projected their own fears onto the unseen driver. This technique would become Spielberg's signature. In Jaws, the shark stays hidden for most of the film. In Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs remain obscured until maximum impact. Duel established the template that would define blockbuster filmmaking for generations. The invisible threat is always scarier than the revealed monster. Destroying the Peterbilt at Mystery Mesa near Vasquez Canyon Road required split-second timing and nerves of steel. The stunt team had exactly one opportunity to send the truck over the cliff, which meant the cameras had to capture everything perfectly on the first take. There was no backup truck, no second chance, no safety net. If anything went wrong, the entire climax of the film would be ruined, and Spielberg's career would likely be over before it started. The crew set up multiple camera angles to ensure they captured the destruction from every possible perspective. But even with careful planning, there were dozens of things that could go wrong. The truck could roll the wrong direction, the cameras could malfunction, the timing could be off by even a second. Spielberg stood behind the cameras watching as the massive Peterbilt rolled toward the cliff edge, picking up speed, then launched into empty air before crashing onto the rocks below in a spectacular explosion of metal and dust. The footage was perfect, the movie had its ending. And Spielberg had just announced himself as a director who could deliver high-stakes action on an impossible budget. The film used 4 identical Plymouth Valiants modified to look exactly the same, because Weaver's car took such a beating throughout the chase that a single vehicle would never survive. Each Valiant was rigged for different types of destruction. One had reinforced panels for collision scenes, another was lightened for speed sequences, A third was equipped with camera mounts for interior shots, and the fourth served as a backup in case any of the others were damaged beyond use. This level of practical planning was essential, because there was no time or money to source replacement vehicles if something went wrong. Every car had to serve a specific purpose, and the production team had to know exactly which vehicle to use for each scene. The logistics were incredibly complex for such a low-budget production, but Spielberg's obsessive attention to detail ensured that every shot looked seamless despite being filmed under brutal time constraints. Duel was originally 90 minutes long, but after it aired on ABC in November 1971 and became a surprise hit, Universal decided to give it a theatrical release in Europe and Australia. Spielberg was brought back to shoot an additional 16 minutes of footage to pad the runtime to feature length. These new scenes added character development and expanded the story, but they also slightly diluted the original's relentless pacing. The theatrical version performed well internationally, which gave Spielberg enough credibility to land his next project, a little film called The Sugarland Express, followed by a bigger project about a killer shark. Without Duel's success, Spielberg might never have gotten the chance to make Jaws. The 13-day television movie that nobody believed in became the foundation for one of the most successful directing careers in film history. And it all started because a faceless truck driver terrorized a traveling salesman on an empty desert highway. The physical landmark from Duel still exists today. Chuck's Cafe, the diner where Weaver's character stops early in the film, sits on Sierra Highway in California. Fans regularly visit the location to take photographs and recreate scenes from the movie. The cafe has barely changed since 1971, maintaining much of its vintage appearance. The phone booth scene, where Weaver frantically tries to call for help while the truck menacingly idles nearby, was filmed at this location and remains one of the most tension-filled moments in the film. Spielberg used the cramped phone booth to create claustrophobic panic, trapping his protagonist in a glass cage while the truck looms just feet away. The scene demonstrates Spielberg's early mastery of spatial anxiety, using physical environment to amplify psychological terror. These weren't expensive special effects or elaborate set pieces. This was pure directorial craftsmanship, manipulating camera angles and actor placement to manufacture dread from nothing. 4 years after Duel proved that truck terror could captivate audiences, White Line Fever took the concept in a completely different direction. Instead of making the truck the villain, this film turned the 18-wheeler into a symbol of working-class rebellion. Jan Michael Vincent played Carroll Joe Hummer, an Air Force veteran who returns home to Arizona and buys his own rig to become an independent trucker. The truck, nicknamed the Blue Mule, was a stunning 1974 Ford WT9000 cabover with a 350 NTC Cummins turbo diesel engine. The truck itself became a character, representing freedom, independence, and the American dream. But the film wasn't interested in feel-good storytelling. Director Jonathan Kaplan wanted to make a modern Western about corruption, violence, and one man's refusal to compromise his integrity. The result was one of the most brutal trucker films ever made, featuring crashes that destroyed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. The film's climactic crash through a giant glass corporate logo cost $130,000 in 1975 money, which translates to approximately $630,000 today. This single stunt consumed a massive portion of the production budget, but Kaplan insisted it was necessary to deliver a satisfying conclusion. The Blue Mule, already damaged from earlier action sequences, had to smash through an enormous glass structure displaying the initials GH for the corrupt corporation that had been terrorizing independent truckers throughout the film. The practical effects team built the glass structure specifically to shatter in spectacular fashion when the truck crashed through it at high speed. There were no computer effects, no digital enhancements, no safety nets. Jan Michael Vincent was behind the wheel of a real truck, driving at genuine speed toward a structure made of actual glass. The footage shows the truck obliterating the barrier in an explosion of shattered glass and twisted metal, sending debris flying in every direction. It was dangerous, expensive, and absolutely unforgettable. Before reaching that final crash, the Blue Mule endures incredible punishment throughout the film. The truck gets riddled with bullets from corrupt truckers hired to stop Carroll Joe's rebellion. The radiator gets destroyed, leaving the engine overheating and smoking as Vincent pushes the vehicle to its limits. The tires get blown out by gunfire, forcing the truck to ride on bare rims that shoot sparks across the pavement. Every system fails, every component breaks down, but Vincent keeps driving because stopping means death. The film doesn't glamorize trucking or romanticize the lifestyle. Instead, it shows the brutal reality of men who risked everything to maintain independence in an industry increasingly controlled by corporate monopolies. The violence inflicted on the truck mirrors the violence inflicted on the working class, making the Blue Mule's destruction a visual metaphor for economic oppression. This wasn't subtle filmmaking, but it was effective. Jan Michael Vincent performed many of his own driving stunts, which was insane considering how dangerous the action sequences became. One scene features a killer T-bone collision between the Blue Mule and a Ford Louisville, with both trucks traveling at significant speed before impact. The crash was carefully choreographed but still incredibly risky, because even slight miscalculation could result in serious injury or death. Vincent later admitted that he started using cocaine during the production of White Line Fever, which may explain his willingness to perform such reckless stunts. The drug use would eventually destroy his career and personal life, but in 1975, he was one of Hollywood's rising stars, bringing genuine intensity to the role of a trucker who refuses to back down. His performance made Carol Joe feel authentic, like a real person pushed past his breaking point rather than an action hero who never breaks a sweat. The film was shot entirely on location in Arizona and Monument Valley, Utah, giving it a stark, sun-bleached visual aesthetic that enhanced the Western influences. Director Kaplan deliberately referenced Sam Peckinpah's violent, morally complex films, particularly The Wild Bunch and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Like Peckinpah, Kaplan wasn't interested in clear heroes and villains. Even Carol Joe makes questionable decisions, and the film doesn't shy away from showing the consequences of his actions. One of the most shocking moments features beloved character actor Slim Pickens getting run over by a truck, a brutal death scene that demonstrated Kaplan's willingness to kill sympathetic characters in service of realism. The film earned $6 million in theatrical rentals, which was solid for a mid-budget action film, but its real impact came from influencing the wave of trucker movies that followed. White Line Fever helped establish the visual and thematic language that would define 70s trucker cinema, but it was Smokey and the Bandit that turned the genre into a cultural phenomenon. Released in 1977, the film became the second highest-grossing movie of the year, beaten only by a little space opera called Star Wars. This wasn't a gritty crime drama or a psychological thriller. This was pure entertainment, a high-speed comedy about bootlegging Coors beer across state lines while evading a vengeful sheriff. Burt Reynolds played the Bandit, the driver of a black Trans Am who served as a decoy to distract police from the real target. Jerry Reed's character Snowman, driving a Kenworth W900A loaded with 400 cases of illegal beer. The chemistry between Reynolds and Reed, combined with director Hal Needham's background as a legendary Hollywood stuntman, created a film that balanced humor with genuinely impressive vehicular action. The production used 3 Kenworth W900A trucks, one 1973 model and 2 1974 models. All 3 featured the film's iconic coffee brown paint with gold trim, and all carried the massive 48-foot trailer decorated with an elaborate hand-painted Old West Bandit mural. That mural became one of the most recognizable images in 70s cinema, symbolizing outlaw freedom and working-class rebellion. The trucks weren't just props or background elements, they were co-stars, featured in extended sequences that showcased their power and versatility. Needham, making his directorial debut after decades of performing death-defying stunts, knew exactly how to film vehicular action to maximize excitement. He understood camera placement, editing rhythm, and the importance of practical effects over optical tricks. Every crash, every jump, every near miss was real, captured on film with minimal safety precautions by modern standards. Hal Needham's stunt background gave him credibility with the performers and crew, but it also meant he pushed everyone to attempt increasingly dangerous sequences. The original budget was $1 million, which seemed reasonable for a regional action comedy. By the time production wrapped, costs had ballooned to $4.3 million, mostly due to the destruction of vehicles and equipment during filming. Pontiac supplied 4 Trans Ams for Burt Reynolds to drive, and the production destroyed 3 of them during various stunts and crashes. By the final scenes, the 4th Trans Am wouldn't start anymore. The car had been beaten so badly that its electrical system failed, forcing the crew to push it into position for shots where the vehicle needed to appear functional. This wasn't careful planning or efficient resource management. This was controlled chaos that somehow resulted in one of the most entertaining films of the decade. The interior cab shots of Snowman's Kenworth were filmed with the truck rigged to a tow vehicle, allowing Jerry Reed to deliver his dialogue without having to concentrate on actually driving. Sound effects were heavily enhanced in post-production to make the engine roars and gear shifts more dramatic, giving the truck an almost mythical presence on screen. These techniques weren't considered cheating. They were standard practice for action filmmaking in an era before digital effects made everything possible. Audiences understood they were watching movie magic, but the magic worked because the foundation was real. Those were actual trucks driving at genuine speeds, performing stunts that required skill and courage. The practical nature of the effects gave the film a visceral quality that computer-generated imagery struggles to replicate even today. Smokey and the Bandit grossed $127 million worldwide, becoming a genuine blockbuster that spawned 2 sequels and countless imitators. Transom sales doubled after the film's release, with Pontiac struggling to keep up with demand for black and gold models that matched the Bandit's car. The cultural impact was enormous, transforming CB radio culture into mainstream fascination and making trucker slang part of everyday vocabulary. Ford Motor Company was so impressed with the film's success that they contributed a $100,000 trailer truck for a nationwide promotional tour, essentially giving the production a mobile billboard that traveled to shopping malls and county fairs. The film turned trucking into aspirational entertainment, making the lifestyle seem exciting and romantic rather than grueling and dangerous. This was fantasy, but it was fantasy that millions of Americans desperately wanted to believe. If Smokey and the Bandit represented the lighthearted commercial side of trucker cinema, then Convoy represented its dark, chaotic soul. Released in 1978 and directed by the legendary Sam Peckinpah, Convoy was based on C.W. McCall's novelty song about a massive convoy of truckers banding together to fight corrupt law enforcement. Peckinpah, already struggling with alcoholism and cocaine addiction, took the project because he needed money and thought it might be fun. Instead, the production became a nightmare that nearly destroyed his career and left him uninsurable by Hollywood standards. The film's budget doubled from $6 million to $12 million. The production finished 11 days behind schedule. Peckinpah's behavior on set became so erratic that second unit director James Coburn was reportedly directing scenes whenever Peckinpah was too intoxicated or high to function. The original rough cut ran 220 minutes, which had to be hacked down to a manageable runtime that left the narrative somewhat incoherent. Despite the chaos behind the scenes, Convoy delivered some of the most spectacular truck crashes ever filmed. The centerpiece was a tanker truck exploding off a bridge over the Colorado River in Needles, California. The practical effects team rigged the tanker with explosives and coordinated with the Needles City Fire Department to provide fire protection during the stunt. The bridge itself was scheduled to be demolished soon after filming, which gave Peckinpah permission to destroy it as part of the scene. The footage shows the massive tanker truck careening off the damaged bridge, catching fire mid-air, then exploding in a massive fireball as it crashes into the river below. Peckinpah used his signature slow-motion technique to stretch the moment, turning vehicular destruction into balletic violence. The explosion was completely real, filmed with multiple cameras to capture every angle of the devastation. It was dangerous, expensive, and absolutely stunning. One of the film's most memorable crashes happened by complete accident. The Widow Woman's 1972 Brockway 361 tipped over during a sharp turn that the driver took too aggressively. Instead of considering it a disaster, Peckinpah kept the footage and incorporated it into the film, embracing the chaos that defined the entire production. This spontaneous approach to filmmaking was classic Peckinpah, who often encouraged improvisation and incorporated accidents into his final cuts. The truck rollover became one of the film's most visually striking moments, demonstrating the raw power and danger of these massive vehicles when pushed beyond their limits. The scene wasn't carefully choreographed or meticulously planned. It was genuine chaos captured on film, which gave it an authenticity that planned stunts sometimes lack. Chris Christopherson's character, known by the CB handle Rubber Duck, drove a distinctive Mack truck featuring a hood ornament shaped like a duck. That specific truck would later appear in Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof in 2007, becoming a piece of cinema history that connected 2 generations of filmmakers obsessed with practical vehicular stunts. Convoy became the 12th highest-grossing film of 1978, which was impressive considering the production disasters and Peckinpah's deteriorating condition. The film found an unexpected audience in the Soviet Union, where its themes of working-class rebellion against corrupt authority resonated with audiences living under communist oppression. Soviet viewers interpreted the convoy as a metaphor for collective action against tyrannical government, reading subtext into a film that was mostly just an excuse to crash trucks and blow things up. Peckinpah's behavior during Convoy made him uninsurable, which meant major studios wouldn't hire him anymore because production insurance companies considered him too great a risk. It would be 5 years before he directed another film, and he would only make one more movie before his death in 1984. Convoy represented the final gasp of a director whose violent, uncompromising vision had revolutionized American cinema in the 60s and 70s, but whose personal demons eventually consumed his career. The film itself is messy, incoherent at times, and far from Peckinpah's best work. But the truck crashes are absolutely spectacular, featuring mile-long convoys smashing through police barriers, destroying cafes, and crashing through school buses in sequences that blur the line between action filmmaking and controlled demolition. The trucker movie boom of the late 70s produced dozens of films trying to capitalize on Smokey and the Bandit's success, but most were forgettable low-budget exploitation. One notable exception was Breaker. Breaker, released in 1977, and notable for being Chuck Norris's first starring role. The film features Norris as a trucker who arrives in a corrupt California town controlled by a crooked judge. When the townspeople steal his brother and impound his truck, Norris proceeds to destroy the entire town using his rig as a weapon. The destruction is absurd, cartoonish, and completely glorious. Norris crashes through buildings, flattens cars, and uses the truck's massive bulk to intimidate and destroy anything in his path. The film has virtually no plot, minimal character development, and production values that barely qualify as professional. But it delivers exactly what the poster promises: Chuck Norris beating people up and destroying property with a semi-truck. Highballin' arrived in 1978 featuring Peter Fonda in another trucker exploitation film, this time about independent truckers fighting against criminals trying to force them out of business. The film features multiple truck crashes, including a spectacular finale where several rigs collide in a massive pileup. Like most trucker films of the era, Highballin' was more interested in vehicular mayhem than coherent storytelling, delivering action sequences designed to thrill audiences who came specifically to watch trucks get destroyed. The Great Smokey Roadblock, also released in 1978, featured Henry Fonda and a young Susan Sarandon in a film about an aging trucker who steals his truck back from the company that repossessed it. These films varied wildly in quality, but they all understood that audiences of the late 70s wanted to see semi-trucks performing impossible stunts and getting destroyed in spectacular fashion. The trucker movie craze died almost as quickly as it emerged. By 1980, audiences had moved on to other genres, and the combination of comedy and vehicular destruction that seemed so fresh in 1977 had become tired and predictable. But the films from this golden age of trucker cinema left an indelible mark on action filmmaking. They proved that practical stunts performed by skilled drivers could create excitement that special effects couldn't match. They demonstrated that vehicles could be characters, that destruction could be art, and that audiences would pay money to watch filmmakers destroy expensive equipment in increasingly creative ways. The directors, stunt coordinators, and drivers who made these films pushed the boundaries of what was possible with practical effects, often risking their lives to capture footage that would thrill audiences for just a few seconds of screen time. These films were products of a specific moment in American culture when truckers represented freedom and independence, when highways symbolized possibility rather than gridlock, and when filmmakers were willing to destroy real vehicles to capture authentic action. The crashes were brutal, the stunts were dangerous, and the films themselves ranged from masterpiece to garbage. But they captured something essential about 70s cinema: a willingness to take risks, a commitment to practical filmmaking, and an understanding that sometimes the best special effect is a real truck crashing through a real barrier at real speed. Modern action films can simulate anything with computers, but they can't replicate the visceral thrill of watching a 1955 Peterbilt launch off a cliff, a Ford cabover smash through a glass structure, or a Kenworth W900A racing across the desert while police cars explode behind it. Those moments are irreplaceable, and they exist only because filmmakers of the 60s and 70s were brave enough, or crazy enough, to destroy millions of dollars worth of equipment in pursuit of the perfect crash.